Accept an application for tax increment financing from Claude Taylor, DBA Golden Harvest, to construct a 9,600 square foot metal building and canopy for the purpose of warehousing and retailing agricultural seed. CRA project number 28. In your packet, you should have received the request for tax increment financing, the redevelopment plan, and I'll let you stand up and introduce yourself to everybody. Sure. If you'd like to.
I think I've met everybody, I hope at least. My name's Colton Van Tyscher. As I said, I'm an attorney out of Gothenburg. I'm partnered with Mike Bacon, and we do various different economic development projects throughout the state. So I'm here representing not only Claude in this Golden Harvest project, but also Chance in the subsequent project down the item for your down the agenda. So I know you guys have dealt with TIF a little bit previously, but I'll do just a brief rundown and then get into the particulars of, okay, what stage in the process are we at right now? Where do we go from here? And then talk a little bit about the particulars of each project, if that's okay with you. So generally TIF gives us the ability to do some cool things, right? So what we do is we take a property that's been declared blighted and substandard. It's a requirement. Both of these properties have met that requirement by a declaration from the City Council. Then what we do is we say if you redevelop that property, you meet certain requirements with that redevelopment, then we can take the property taxes that are generated from the increase in value off that property and flow them back into the project. Now, we can't do that just for anything willy-nilly. Typically, we say TIF helps you build out, but not necessarily up. We have a couple of different caveats to that. One being housing, which I think you guys had dealt with previously, and the second being rehabilitation of the property. We also have that limitation of the taxes, so we can only capture those taxes for 15 years. So I can come in and say I'm going to create some taxes and I want you to give me all the money in the world for it, but at the end of the day, I'm only paying so much in taxes, and so that's my second limitation there. Then the final limitation is, of course, your but-for test, and that test comes down to, okay, but for the use of TIF, but for these funds, I wouldn't be able to move forward with this project as it is defined here. So where we are, again, that's just a brief overview. Where we are right now in the process, like I said, the city's already declared these properties as blighted and substandard. And so now we have a redevelopment plan that has been presented to the CRA. So what we're looking from you guys is to refer that plan on to the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission considers whether the plan is in conformity with the general plan for development of the community as a whole. So that's your comprehensive plan that the city and the Planning Commission have put in place. Now, if the Planning Commission says, yes, this is in conformity with that general plan, then they can make that declaration, and it kicks back to you guys. And the CRA considers the plan, you conduct a cost-benefit analysis, and you have the ability to recommend approval of the plan to the City Council. Again, the City Council looks at that plan, determines whether or not that plan should be approved. And if they do approve it, then the plan kicks back to you guys as the CRA, and we look to you to approve a redevelopment contract and ultimately issue that TIF bond. So a bit of an elongated process with a few different entities or authorities coming into play with their respective purposes. You guys as the Redevelopment Authority, the Planning Commission obviously is the duty to uphold those zoning regs and that comprehensive plan, and the city as the overall municipal authority overseeing all of this process. So what we have right here with the Golden Harvest project, as you mentioned in your readout, is a proposed 9,600 square foot retail space for this Golden Harvest seed sales. Ultimately, $555,000 investment. They're looking for what would be a $70,000 TIF bond based on the anticipated incremental value of about, or total valuation of the property, which would be about $400,000 if I'm not mistaken. So one thing that I do want to point out is there is a question on conformity with the general plan. The property is zoned as commercial 3 right now. If the planning commission looks at this project and says, we're dealing with a warehouse here actually, then really that would fit more in line with the industrial 1 zoning classification. And so what they would have to do is stop the process, and if they so choose, and if the council chooses, amend that comprehensive plan and change that zoning classification. And what that would require is a public hearing by the planning commission and also a public hearing by the city council. If that gets approved, then we start all over again at the planning commission. They can say, okay, now that we've made that change, we're in conformity with the plan. It goes back to you guys, up to the city, and then down here. You have a question already?
This is not a question. At
Sure.
this point in time,
Mhm.
I have applications for zoning to rezone those properties from both.
Mhm.
So my plan is to have those applications heard first, and then when the planning commission hears this for their resolution, they will have already passed that.
So that way you've got ahead of any potential issues that could be presented at the planning commission, right? Okay, so you wouldn't have to go through that.
You're saying that the planning commission has already reviewed this?
No, I'm saying that at the same meeting, the planning commission first will review the applications for zoning, to rezone the properties, and that way, if they pass, then they can go ahead and consider the applications for the.
So as a matter of efficiency, it makes more sense to preempt that and
Keeps
apply
it
for
from
that.
going back and
zone
having
change.
another meeting.
Exactly, so. Okay. So, like I said, I think that was the only potential hiccup that could have been presented for this project at the planning commission level. But again, all we're looking for here with the redevelopment authority is to refer that plan onto the planning commission. And I believe you do have a resolution in front of you today to approve that. So if you have any questions on this particular project or just the TIP process as a whole, I'm more than happy to field them.
I do have a question as I was looking through the application. It for a bond issuance, and where is that bond coming from?
Sure. So what we do is the value is based on that present value of anticipated tax revenues.
Correct.
That we're seeing. And so typically what we see is the redeveloper purchases that bond. What I do is I go to the bank, I say, I'm going to have these taxes pledged to pay off this bond over a 15-year period. So the banker is going to tell me, okay, I'll loan you the money for that, but it's going to cost you some in interest. And so that's where you see that present value calculation come into play for that bond. But like I said, typically the redeveloper does come in to purchase that.
Has that been confirmed or discussed, or has that been pre-approved?
To be honest, I'm not for sure on that. I would say with the amount of the bond here, it would make sense to me if the redeveloper was tearing that down themselves, but I can't speak with certainty. And again, that's something that would come into play with the redevelopment contract as that's negotiated with the redeveloper and the CRA if we get to that point down the road.
Where's the present location of the business?
To be fair, I'm not 100% sure. I believe there's an expansion that's going on here, but present location, I'm not 100% sure.
And do you know what the present what's the present full-time equivalent employee base right now?
I don't have that information for you.
I can answer that, Kyle. That one's Ron Tillery with PCBC. Mr. Taylor does business in conjunction with a company in Kearney and is warehousing out of there now. And so he's relocating the business here. He has a customer base that's been a loyal and long-time customer base in this area. I don't have his current employment numbers, but he estimates that the business that he's proposing here will employ 10 to 12 people, full-time people.
Thank you.
Ron, is he warehousing in support of just his sales activities, or is another?
He is leasing space or partnering with another entity to provide him space. And so this will be establishing the Golden Harvest operation in Holdridge.
And He's already acquired the property, 149,000.
Part of it.
Part of it, there is some state lands that would be
Yeah.
included in this plan. Mhm.
Well, but is the 149, he's purchased a property for 149,000.
That's my understanding, correct?
And then there's another additional 24,000 that is estimated relative to the state issue.
That's correct, yep.
And then the other cost is the site prep and the utility extension. So the utility and the site prep is about 21,500. And the additional cost on the potential state parcel is 24,000. 45,500-ish in total on those two.
Sure.
And there's a request of 70,000 in tip. What's the balance of that going towards?
Sure, so one point that should be made is the legislature actually changed the statute a couple years ago with respect to what you can do before a project begins, include as a TIF eligible expense. And one of those TIF eligible expenses is the acquisition of the property, also the demolition of the property. So as a TIF eligible expense, that purchase price for the value of that property would be able to come into play based on the change in the legislature.
Is that correct, how you understand it, Rod?
Well, somewhat. I haven't had time to really study this over. It came in over the weekend and we're starting to talk about a bond. And typically we haven't, the CRA hasn't done a bond. We did one for Perry. You did that at the bank. And we did one recently on the Mesner project, somewhat of a bond. We haven't seen it yet, but I guess I don't have enough. Yes, there is that statute, I have it, that once a contract, if you get a contract approved, and once you get it approved, some qualifying costs are preparation of materials and applications, cost-benefit analysis, preparation of redevelopment contract, land acquisition, surveys, environmental studies, site demolition, and preparation. So those can be part of the TIF contract, but ultimately the TIF contract you can do any number of years up to 15. You can do any percentage of the increase in value. You can put a limit. For example, I remember on Bosselman's we put a limit on that project. So I mean, you can do all of that. Dane mentioned he's going to do both of those at the same meeting. I'm not sure we can. I'm not sure that if they approve it, the second phase, if they say that this is in conformity with the plan, but the council hasn't approved the change in zoning, I'm not sure you can do that.
Okay.
And then what would some of the factors of the planning commission defining this as a warehouse as opposed to retail? Because what retail is coming, I mean, what retail is coming out of this?
Sure, so first of all, that would ultimately fall on the planning commission's determination, right? And their council as far as determining, okay, are we falling in line with our zoning regs here, right?
And so for them to determine that, they're going to be asking the business owner what the specific nature of the business is, right?
Sure.
I'm just asking.
And my understanding is
Have a conversation.
there is going to be a retail sale, right, or sale of seed out of this office, right? Because there's going to be office space tied into this. Now again, and it sounds like we're already moving forward down that process to make it ultimately a moot point if they're working towards reclassifying the zone.
Back to Kyle's question, I think his original question was, well, you listed off the additional purchase of the state grounds, 24,000, plumbing and sewer, 12,000, and water, 2,500. I think where you're going with that is what is the rest, if we're saying the tip proceeds, the principal amount of the tip proceeds is $70,000. Is your question, what is the rest of those funds from the tip proceeds being used for?
Yeah, and I think he answered the
He
question,
answered
but I would go further to say that, you know, they've injected that. I mean, they're in. I mean,
Because
when
they've already
you go
purchased
to
the
the
land.
but-for test, the but-for is, you know, what I'm penciling out is what the real need is. If you estimate the state cost of $24,000, the real need may be, I don't know, maybe $45,000.
Sure, so to that point, this has been a discussion that's been had in the legislature over the last 5, 7, 10 years. I wrote a nice 50-page law review article on it if you guys really wanted to get into. Basically, this is just constantly a battle in the legislature. And that's ultimately what led to that change a couple years ago, is there was that question, you know, if we purchase the property before we've been approved for TIF, does that cause that but-for test to fail? And what the legislature did was they responded and they said, you know, we can include that because, as you know, if somebody invests a bit of funds into a project up front, right, that's still not necessarily going to mean that the full scope of their project, which is in front of us here with the redevelopment plan, is for sure going to go forward. So,
I mean,
again,
we can look at it and consider it as qualifiable. And we can do just that. We can look at it, consider it, but we don't have to.
And that's, you don't have to.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just within the confines of the law, what can we do? So.
And Rod, is this, right now, we're just accepting their application and asking and sending it to the planning commission? That's all we're doing is accepting the application, correct?
That's all we're doing, but I just don't know. I think you gotta have it rezoned before they can approve it. And I think you gotta have the council accept that rezoning before they can approve it. But I haven't had time to look that up.
But what I'm saying is, at this time, I mean, our only step is to review and accept the application and send it to the planning commission, correct?
That's what you'd
Yeah.
be doing here tonight.
Yeah,
yes.
we're not making any.
There's still a lot of things to be discussed.
Correct.
In other words, how many years, what percent?
Right.
What, are you gonna put a cap on this thing?
When do we
But-
do that, Rod? Do we do that now? Do we talk about that now, or do we wait till it
Well,
comes back from the zoning?
You can do it either way. I mean, a lot of times these are negotiated out ahead of time.
But if we accept the application, does that mean that we are tied to doing something? We
Well,
can
you're-
come back the next meeting
The
and,
further you get along, the more apt somebody's gonna say, whoa, you put us in a bind here because you said you were gonna do this.
I mean, I go to Rod made a valid point, and I think there's probably a few of us on the board that would say that, and it happened how it happened, but quite honestly, with having this information presented on a holiday week, when we knew when the meeting was, but this information was, you know, on my desk. I'm on holiday. I don't know when it was dropped off, and I'm not, you know, pointing fingers. You know, I'm not saying it's Dane's fault, but if this was put together and it got to Dane on Friday and it was dropped off and delivered to us, but you know, both of these applications need further review as far as I'm concerned.
And to that point, again, setting aside for a minute the time with which you had to review the application. I don't know what that timeline was, and I apologize if it was a result of my office's lack of quick work. But the point here is, if you refer it to the planning commission, you're not committing to anything. This is moving it along in the process, but it's a part of that process. And again, that's why we do this. That's why you have a public hearing in front of the planning commission, in front of the city.
Well, I'd say the other thing is, you know, it's been the norm of the 85%, 15% is, are we doing that on these?
Now say that again?
The breakdown of the 85%?
Well, you mean the 90-10?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
90-10?
Yeah, that, the council passed that
Yeah.
resolution because,
So I mean, is that need to be in the application?
no, because that's a given. In other
Okay.
words, 10% of what goes to the redeveloper, when this, no matter what numbers you come up with, 10% of whatever the redeveloper goes into the city general fund, and, you know, Det's talked to them about that 10%, maybe part of that going into the CRA for their projects. That 10% stays with the city in either the city general fund or the CRA, whatever, however you want to say that. And that's up to the council and to you guys to figure that out. But is that the question you're answering?
Well, I think,
I think part of the question he's
part of
asking-
it, but the other is this 85% of the increased value, or is
Well,
this
we haven't got
proposed
to
as?
that yet.
So my understanding is really the 85-15 or 90-10 that the city passed the resolution on ultimately comes out of that TIF bond, if I'm not mistaken.
Well-
And so really that would be developed, that would be negotiated through that redevelopment contract.
With the contract
Yeah,
itself?
that TIF bond's kind of bothering me here because when you do bonds, well, then you've obligated the CRA, and we want to make sure that the CRA doesn't have any responsibility if that bond isn't paid, because you don't know what the legislature's going to do on property taxes. I mean, since this is in the city limits, I think it's pretty safe the taxes are going to be there. But on that bond, we need to clarify what they're really asking for on that first, because I don't think we want to get into this, we're doing a bond. In other words, we've been pay-as-you-go, which qualifies as a bond. But he's talking about doing an actual bond,
Yeah.
which is a different deal, and I'm not sure you want to get into that. I mean, I think that needs to be clarified.
Rod, where we've done it before, weren't we able to get some comfort level on our liability was eliminated by the language in that bond?
On the Mesner bond, yes, it was. I don't remember back on the Perry bond. I think we were on the hook. Kyle knows because he handled that.
No, you weren't on the hook.
Huh?
You were not on the hook.
As long as that bond says that the city and the CRA is not on the hook, well then they're saying the same thing as what I'm saying, is pay as you go means if the tax don't come in or they don't pay them, we're not obligated to give them anything.
I think Colton's got
Okay.
it.
To be fair, the state statute does say that the city or its subparts, the CRA, cannot be held ultimately liable on a tax increment financing revenue bond.
Okay.
That's in statute.
Okay.
But to be fair also, when we deal with this and the redeveloper purchases the bond and they're entitled to repayment, again, you negotiate that contract to say, if the taxes don't reach to the point where we expected them to be, then ultimately what that results in is a cancellation of that indebtedness to the redeveloper. So at the end of the day, it does become a wash. But I do want to make clear, state statute does say that the city could not be held liable for that bond.
And they're asking for a full 15 years?
I believe that's the case. Yep. And again, that does come into play again after the city council's consideration and in negotiating that redevelopment contract.
We can negotiate that.
Sure.
You can, the only thing is your negotiating posture is a little better if you get it all done ahead of time. I mean, once you get down the road and they say, oh, we're buying materials and we gotta let our contractor know, and that's up to you folks.
Well, what would be the possibility of, I guess, doing that before we move the application to the next process?
Well, that's up to you guys. I mean,
You mean
it's possible.
Can we do it tonight, or can
No, we need to.
we need something in writing?
We
You
can't do
folks
that
need to
tonight,
talk
Colton,
and see.
can we? Not in your position, you don't have,
Right, I don't have
Your
my
client here.
client here
Yeah.
to negotiate terms like that. Again, I I would raise questions on saying, yes, we are going to do this as a CRA without having gone through the process that's required as far as going to the Planning Commission and then back to you guys, up to the City Council and down through. To set something in stone this early on in the process, to set it in stone, in my opinion, would violate the process that we're supposed to be following here this fall, as far as going through those different channels.
So, Dan?
I'm not as hesitant to move it forward. I don't see, we're not committing to anything, right?
We're committing to nothing. We're only saying that we're sending this application to the planning commission.
That's my point.
We're not saying as a CRA that we are approving the project or anything at this point, correct? Am I correct,
I mean,
Rod?
Kyle, you kind of seem to be opposed.
Well, I'm not opposed to doing that. I guess I'm just looking at it on the efficiency part of it. I mean, my first thing is that, I don't know, have you guys had thorough opportunity to go through
Everything?
both of these and really had, I mean, I went through them, but to the degree of, you know, really sitting back and going, okay, does this really meet, you know, where are we at right now as a CRA board and how much ground do we still have allocated? Does this really fit, you know, within our strategic plan, if you will, to digest all of this? I guess, so the timing of the information is a little bit, you know, I would like to have some additional discussion as a board as to, does this really fit our, you know, our mission statement going forward? Beyond that, I don't have a problem taking it up the food chain to the Planning Commission. I think if we're ultimately not going to do anything efficiency-wise, it wouldn't go there, correct? Or would it? Would it still go there?
It won't unless you approve it.
Yeah.
You have to approve it.
But-
What you're saying, why even set it up there?
Well, that's a little bit of my concern of, you know, I don't want the Planning Commission going, well, you know,
Why did you send
why'd
this
you guys
to
send this up? I think that's where Rod, I'm guessing that's what Rod's saying. The further you go with the process, the more telling it is that the board is in favor of it.
That's right. I mean, the further you get into this thing, the more out there say, well, we relied on you, you shouldn't have let us on, you know.
I guess I'd say I'd definitely like some more time to look through it, and maybe an opportunity to negotiate the terms. You know, the terms of it would probably be the thing I would want to spend some time on the most, you know, just, I'm like Kyle, I didn't have a chance to look at it until this afternoon. And I worked on Friday and I still didn't have it, you know, with me until Sunday, so, I don't know. I would lean more maybe towards either doing some more analysis on the community impact of a facility like this. This is quite a bit different from anything that we've looked at before. I'd really like some information on how many people he's employing. 10 to 12 jobs sounds like a lot for a seed dealer. I'd like some information on, you know, what type of jobs we're talking about. You know, really, if we're you know, assuming we're comfortable saying that this facility isn't going to be constructed without TIF help, we still have some responsibility to the taxpayers to make sure that, you know, this is the type of project that's going to make a big enough impact to the community that's worthwhile pursuing. You know, frankly, the details in the application are pretty limited on that type of information. So, you know, I don't have a problem advancing it, but I would definitely throw out the disclosure that I'm probably going to look for renegotiated terms before I would advance it a second time.
And to that point, everything that you mentioned there, again, we can work toward. Again, this is a process. So if we start to move this along, again, because realize you're dealing with a redeveloper that has time constraints as well, right? But if we can move that along while at the same time having those conversations, to me, that's a productive, efficient way of doing it. And those points are well received. Getting some more details in that application, talking a little bit more specifically about those terms.
And I would agree with Jared. So the other thing is getting some more specific. I mean, we're using the word estimate here. What's the status on the state deal? Is that gonna get done? Is it, if it doesn't get done, it's not gonna come to fruition, or what's going on there?
Do you know any particulars on the state deal?
It's my understanding that the state has to do a fairly rigorous evaluation process on the property. They look at recent transactions in the neighborhood. The state land is not critical to the operation of the business, but it's desirable so that they have more flexibility of use of the space. Essentially, it would permit the company to do more landscaping and ease of traffic around the facility, parking, that sort of thing.
So if he didn't get this state deal done, you're saying that he would start the process?
I can't
Or,
answer that.
so, I mean, once again, you know.
Do you know when he's supposed to find out about this state deal, Ron?
No, I don't.
Okay.
And I'm not sure
And-
that it is knowable at this time.
Okay.
The state moves at its pace, whatever that pace is. But I'd be, excuse me, Dane, has the planning commission meeting been scheduled?
No.
It has not been
And it
scheduled.
won't be until, we would start advertising on Friday, because you have to advertise twice, 2 weeks apart,
Will it
10
be in
days
December?
before, blah, blah, blah. Will be January, the second Thursday in January.
Okay, so there's ample time for a lot of this material to be gathered and provided to you.
So on the projected sources and uses on this, I mean, it's 70,000 for TIF, and then with a bond, and he's gonna pay 50,000 in interest costs over 15 years.
Yeah, the total disbursements
Is
would
120.
be 120. It's 8 times 15.
Mhm.
And again, that goes to, it goes down to buy down his interest ultimately,
Sure.
right? You know, it typically, for, in other communities, in my community, for example, I sit on the CRA actually, we buy some of our TIP bonds. 0%, we loan them out, that way we can get the redeveloper more money at the beginning. So it just depends on how they're financing that purchase of the bond. And here, as you've raised some concerns, it might not be that he had 120,000 of TIF eligible expenses in the CRA's eyes. So that's part of the consideration as well.
Does he have a commitment from the lender?
I believe he does, and I believe the commitment, again, is contingent on receipt of TIF financing.
Working with Equitable out of North Platte.
Didn't we see that somewhere?
It's on the other copy of that.
Oh, okay.
Letter.
Where did you say again now?
Equitable out of North Platte. I believe the lender's name is Chad Johnson.
So what do we say? I mean, do we want to approve the application with them knowing that there's gonna be other stuff?
I guess we're not approving the application, we're just accepting it.
Accepting it.
And it's sending it to the planning commission.
Okay.
And then we've got probably over a month to negotiate some things with the redevelopment plan and,
At a future meeting,
right,
and I would suggest that Mr. Taylor be here.
He was, when this meeting was scheduled, he already had plans to be in Oklahoma for business this week, so He sends his apologies.
He did return my call, though.
Yeah, you did. Is there a motion to review and as we have reviewed and accept the application for tax increment financing from Claude Taylor to send this to the Planning Commission?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion by Jared, a second by Dan.
Kyle,
Aye.
Dan,
Yes.
Diet,
Aye.
Steve,
Yes.
Jared.
Yes.
So the motion has been moved and seconded and approved that this will go to the Planning Commission, and we as a CRA will set an additional meeting so we can do some more talking about it. Clayton, I guess, you know, one of the things we want to look at as a CRA, and, you know, maybe talk with some of our council members too, is, you know, like Kyle and I think Jared both brought up, it's a different type of project than we've ever done before, you know, and the impacts on the community and whatever. But typically, you know, we kind of, how do I want to say this the right way? You know, what they're asking for, whether we want to grant 15 years, not sure. You know, and we're looking at, you know, our CRA, we've been together a long time, but we're looking at kind of being a more proactive CRA and trying to do some new things. So we're looking at, like you say you sit on your CRA board.
Yep.
And you capture some of those funds, so you can loan them out, correct?
We actually don't capture
Okay.
our TIF funds, but,
Okay.
yep, but I understand that what you guys are doing.
You know what I'm-
As far as
yeah.
trying to build up your.
Yeah,
your-
right.
yep, mhm.
So we've approved this to move on to the Planning Commission, and we'll do some negotiating in the time. We'll let you know when that next meeting is.
They're good. And to be clear, that vote was on approval of this resolution 2019-04.
Yes, it was.
Are you writing that down as an approval of the resolution?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we reviewed and we adopted the resolution? Is that right,
We
David?
did, yep.
Okay, so we're on to number 5, correct?
You're on to number 3, if you want to talk about the redevelopment plan specifically for the
Okay.
Golden Ponds
Okay.
project. We'll do that.
Do we want to, item number 3, review the Golden Harvest redevelopment plan? So that would be the next in line on your documents. Do we want to discuss?
And maybe you've done that.
I think we've discussed
enough.
Yeah,
all of this enough that we can move
you're
on.
actually done with 1 through 4.
Because number 4 is what we just did.
Yeah.
We sent it to the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Okay, that's kind of where I was. We're on to number 5. Review and accept an application for tax increment financing from Chance Banky, Iron Horse Flats LLC, to carry out plans for programs of voluntary and compulsory repair and rehabilitation of the Iron Horse Flats apartment building in accordance with the redevelopment plan.
Okay, so
Clayton.
here we are again. Colton Van Tyscher. So this is obviously a different project. Again, same scenario. We're looking at moving this forward. There are things that we need to parse through and work through, and we're certainly willing to do that. But this is a bit of a different setup. Obviously, we're talking about a 12,000 square foot multifamily 18-unit apartment complex. If I'm not mistaken, Chance had begun this project prior to today, right? Now, Chance experienced some significant cost overruns. After they got into the structure, they realized that the dilapidation of the structure was far advanced than what they had initially anticipated. And as a result, their costs have gone up. And what that means, particularly with your but-for test, that the project that Chance started with when he first began working on this property was defined in one way. When he got in there and the game changed, the project has now changed as well. And so what he's requesting is the TIF assistance, in addition to some assistance from the Development Corporation to help him get this over to the finish line. I think one particular piece with the Planning Commission was the special use permit discussion. There was some question of whether it was grandfathered in or not, and I believe they're moving forward with that, anticipating doing that in January. So ultimately, $675,000 of estimated investment into the community for this project, and requesting in this project a $100,000 TIF bond. Now the point here, to be clear, is this falls under the rehabilitation project or portion of the statute. So different from infrastructure build out, different from site acquisition, demolition, although that's included. But this is really rehabilitating a dilapidated structure that truly needed it. So, any questions, Chance and I?
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions for me, so I'd be happy to answer those and maybe describe to you more about the project and where we're at this particular point in the project.
So Clayton, can you tell me,
It's Colton.
Colton, I'm
okay.
sorry.
You can try to say my last name, it's Van Tyscher.
Yeah.
Okay. Colton, I'm gonna write that down so I don't do that again. So where does the but-for come into play here?
Right, so.
There is no but-for.
He said pause, right? He can't get to the end of this project as defined without some additional.
This project is not completed.
No.
Correct.
So where the, you've got 398,000 in equity. So you've injected 398,000 into this project to date.
Correct.
And is
the
that-
application is a little out, there's a few things that may be not 100% correct in the application as far as the estimate, just because it's a little behind, but it's.
So of that 398,000, is that all injection, is that all capital that you've injected yourself, or is any of that financing?
Part of it is financed, yes.
How much is that as finance?
Let's see, it's.
I mean, it indicates bank loan 200,000 estimated.
That's correct, yes.
Is that part of that 398,000 equity?
Yes.
So you have 198,000 on top of that you've injected into the project?
You're correct.
So we could only issue TIF on the difference between what's been done today and what it would take to put them across the finish line, correct?
I don't think you can even do that. In other words, I think you don't meet the but-for test. The but-for test says, but for TIF, this project would not happen. This project is
Not happen, not be completed.
They're renting apartments out now.
Yep. So where we're at, just a simple way to, you guys are welcome to come look at the apartment complex. We've had open tours, but there's 18 apartments, 10 are completed, they're pre-leased, rented, people are moving in today. What we need is TIF and PCDC help to complete the last 8 apartments. The other 10 apartments, they'll be lived in, the building is operational, the fire marshal's been there, it's livable. The question is, does holders want 18 apartments or 10 apartments? That's where we're at is, we have 8 apartments that are gonna sit there, not rented, or we have 18 apartments that can get rented, and that's where we're at. And our thing is, we've just ran into a lot of structural issues that we could not have seen when we started doing demolition. We ran into major structural issues that we didn't plan on, new footings, steel beams, I-beams, problems with the brick and masonry. We've had to put in new electrical service, new plumbing, new sewer.
So the estimate that you have in here is 598,000. Is 598,000 the total from day one to what you anticipate completion to be?
Correct.
Or is this 598,000 what you need to complete it?
That's from day one, I believe.
Okay, so what is it that it's gonna take to completed from right here to completion? Do you have a firm?
Yeah, and I did provide that to the attorneys over here. And I apologize, I've never done a TIF application.
That's fine,
I did
here.
provide everything to Mike Bacon. I don't know how exactly he put it into here, so.
So what was the total cost of the unknowns and, I mean, I'm struggling with this too
If we
because
can't
it's,
get past the but-for
Yeah.
test, that becomes mute.
yeah.
Well, let's back up for a second. What was the original projected cost to do the whole project?
Do you remember, Ron, when I know it's been a long time ago, about a year ago? Okay. I had provided everything to PCDC a little over, like, almost a year and a half ago, or over a year ago. I didn't bring that with me. A lot less, I guess, like, less than half.
And it's 675 now?
Well, si-
So 598.
675 is what the estimated market value at completion is.
Oh, okay.
That's what there's.
598.
But
Plus the
598
cost of
is
building.
the estimate of the renovations.
Right.
And what was the cost of the building?
Cost of the building was 190.
What's it currently assessed at?
100. It was at 190. I challenged the assessment just recently.
How much was the grant from PCDC?
92.5.
92.5. Well,
It's up to 92.5, depending, that's based on the number of units that are completed. And it is on a reimbursement basis. So he hasn't received any of those funds yet.
well, I'm confused on the numbers because I'm reading a press release here that says, Chance says his company is investing more than $1 million into the project, and they were happy to receive a substantial grant from PCDC to help fund the project. And this news release, when it was started, said, we are doing a complete renovation of the entire building. There will be 18 apartments when we're done. I mean, so on and so forth. I mean, none of that jives with what we got tonight.
Have you talked to the assessor? Your estimated market value upon completion, I remember when I did my renovation project, I shouldn't say it, my brother did his renovation project at the Chevy store.
Yeah.
We talked to the assessor before we applied for TIF, and they said, well, if you're not adding any square footage, all you're doing is putting, I mean, we renovated the whole showroom, but we put new tile down, put new ceiling in, and it didn't affect our taxes. Our assessment didn't go up at all.
Yeah, I did talk to the assessor, Melanie Marvin. I talked to the assessors that do the assessing, that, you know, do it. And I talked to Melanie Marvin again, and I talked to Rod as well in his office.
Well, I told you to go talk to Melody, is what I told you.
Yeah, you also told me that you thought that, and correct me if I'm not phrasing it correctly, you said if there's any project that should qualify for TIF, I believe it's this project.
And I would agree, it's a great project. I'm just saying it's too late for TIF. I mean, how far back are you gonna go? A year, 2 years, 3 years? I mean, there's other buildings that have been restored around town.
And that's up for you guys to decide. I'm not, I mean,
Yeah.
what you decide is what you decide, but basically what we're looking at is with the funds that we have, and we've talked to every bank we can, and Adams Bank and Trust is who, the one that we have the loan with now. We have a letter from them essentially stating we have no more funds left to do this project. So if we don't get the funds between PCDC and TIF, there'll still be 10 apartments. That's not an issue, but there won't be 18 apartments. They're gonna sit there.
I don't know that, but what did Melody Marvin say? Did she say?
She told me to meet with the assessors, and so I did. They met at the building, they walked every square inch of it. It was actually just one guy from Kearney. He was there for about 3 hours. They wouldn't commit to anything, but basically what he told me was that I should submit my invoices when I was done with the work. That's what he said, submit your invoices, you're done with the work.
And be reassessed based on the invoices?
Correct.
Well, I didn't do any of that, but.
A good point on the assessment from the assessor with the commercial.
We didn't even need a
properties.
building permit. Well, they said you're not, You're not adding on, you're not doing anything, we didn't even have to.
We had to get permits, but the city of Holder's been there for electrical, excuse me, not electrical, the state does electrical, plumbing is what the city has been there for plumbing. We've had fence permits, of course, through downstairs.
And the assessor, when they go through and input the figures into their database, they're going to look at the number of rentable units. It's part of what they do. I represent numerous assessors throughout the state, because at the end of the day, they have
And they weren't considered rentable before?
What's that?
They weren't considered rentable before you purchased?
Well, if he has 10 units that are being rented now, and they're gonna assess a quality of the value, or of those types of units too, right? So if he's saying he has 10 units right now that he can rent out that are quality, then those other 8, that's where you're getting that addition there.
You asked the question though, as it was rentable, and I wish I had been through this process before, because I would have brought the architect and engineer here with me, but I 100% guarantee you that within 10 or 15 years, people would have died in that building. It is the most dilapidated, it was in such horrible condition. The problem was, so let's say for example, a plumber wanted to run a pipe. So what they would do when they remodeled is they would cut into a floor joist, causing the floor to go like this, basically have no structural support, so they would build a ceiling, lower the ceiling at 8 foot. So we start tearing out ceilings, everything else, we run into huge structural issues, bad footings, floor joist cut, just, no fire safety. For example, there was essentially one fire exit that was falling down. There was windows that didn't meet egress. There was no fire safety. So yes, it was a current operational apartment building. It just wasn't safe or habitable. For example, some things we've had to do. I mean, I can go on all night long, but some major expenses we ran into was we installed 3 fire escapes. We put in a full fire alarm system, hardwired smoke detectors. The building will meet all current 2019 fire code. So what you have is a safe, operational, habitable building, rather than a hodgepodge of apartments that were maybe possibly inhabitable until the building collapsed.
And you would be able to get bond financing on this?
Repeat that again, I'm sorry.
The bond, this is gonna be bondable?
Yes, yeah,
You have that,
we do.
you have that
Secured?
in writing?
And just as with the last project, we can get that letter to the authority and to the council that shows this is the commitment, and this is what they're willing to back.
Mike Bacon's office actually has a letter that states that from Adams Bacon Trust to Richard Johnson and Uncle Walnut.
That they would fund the bonding piece of this, but they won't finance anything?
Basically, they'll
beyond
only
that?
finance it if they know that TIF's gonna provide the money. And that, I think that letter should have been provided in the packet, maybe it wasn't.
That
Okay.
I'm not for sure on.
It was,
Yeah.
it was
We can get
supposed to have
you.
been, so.
Well, what happened to the $1 million you were gonna put into the project? We're not there yet.
That may have been misquoted or misstated, because I don't know, I can't,
What says Chase said his company's investing more than $1 million.
I didn't write the article again, I
Oh, I
don't
see.
know.
And that's, to be fair, if he had $1 million, then he wouldn't be sitting here, right?
Well, that's what this article says.
Who wrote it?
PCDC. You want it?
Rod, also, I talked to you from day one about this. I was sitting in your office.
You did?
Asking for guidance from day one, so if I had to.
No, you didn't.
No, I did.
I've got, if I'm on trial here, I've got documented all my conferences with him. Do you want me to go through all that?
Not really.
Well, and to be fair, I don't think anyone's on trial here. Again, we are simply being asked if the CRA will refer this plan up to the planning commission. Now, if there are additional questions that we need to work towards addressing, then again, we're willing to go down that road. But again, for purposes of efficiency and productivity, it would be helpful if we could move it along to the planning commission and work towards working through some of those issues.
For purposes of efficiency, it's time to put this to rest.
Rod, do the statutes prohibit granting TIF to a project that's already been started?
Yes?
Okay.
Colton?
I would disagree with that, because
Well, could I read
the
it?
scope of a project changes, right? So what the statute says is essentially the but-for test, right? But-for
I'll read
is-
it when you're done.
Do you want to go ahead now?
Go ahead.
Okay, so basically, but for but for these TIF funds, this project wouldn't move forward. The project that you have in front of you now is fundamentally different than the project that was started in the beginning. That's again, that piece that I think is being lost a little bit in translation is, again, he uncovered a lot more costs and expenses that he was being faced with to meet the rehabilitation needs.
Okay, my question is, and it's for both of you that know, that are attorneys, okay? It's for Rod and Colton, is, so can we grant TIF financing from the original assessed value before the project was ever started? Or do we have to go with where the assessed value is at
That
this
was
point
my
before
first
they
question.
That's what Dan,
complete it?
Because you would think if it's gonna be assessed different now, that
Do you know, Colton?
Yes, so basically we set the division date when the project is approved. So the division date would be effectively January 1 of 2021, if I'm not mistaken. But basically, we don't divide those taxes, we don't set that base value until the project